Hi, it's Harry Redknapp here. You're listening to a proper podcast. It's the Alan Hudson Podcast. It's proper football, proper talk.
I mean, he came down with a hunger and a passion. Came down to Liverpool before I was involved in football with Big Ron Yates around about that time. And of all the people I've met, and I've been so lucky, all the people I've met and spent time with, the one that I would most want to go back and spend more time with would be Bill Shankly. Not because he was a rounded man at all. He was actually very blinkered. He was a terrible loser. You know, he could do feeling sorry for himself to Mourinho levels. He really could. But you talked about Paul Elliott. It just came from the heart. He was like a Presbyterian preacher. When he spoke, you actually hung on every single word and believed every single word because he believed it. And some of it was pure fantasy, but he believed it. He spoke with such a conviction, like a religious zeal. And so being a young player falling under his spell as Ian did coming down from Motherwell and being presented with this chance. And of course, to live in Liverpool in the early mid-60s, you were at the center of the universe. You know, there were four young guys who couldn't kick a football who, I mean, I'm sure that you're the same kind of generation to me. They changed our lives. You know, I was that kid who queued up outside the record store for the next Beatles single. And they were kicking my parents up the backside, kicking Elvis into touch, kicking, you know, rock and roll and Bill Haley and everything that they loved into touch. And in this city, which is unlike any other in the UK, because of its links with overseas, because it was the port and it was the center of the slave trade once upon a time, this city, which is full of very, very individual people, and it all happened at the same time. And Bill, and funny enough, Harry Catterick at Everton arrived around about the same time on Merseyside, and Shanks just got it. He loved the whole theatre of the cop and everything to do with Liverpool. And you know, you talk about people talk about projects in football now. And this manager's come in with a project. The Bill Shankly project is still going at Liverpool because all red kit him. This is Anfield above the he put that in. You know, all of that passion and intensity that Klopp's team, when they're at it, play with. That was the Shanks way, and that suited Ian St John right down to the ground. I mean, you'll remember playing against him, and it's supposed to be the defenders who hurt you and leave one on you, but he was one of those strikers who left one on you, I bet.
Well, I played against Ian at the very end of his career, the very beginning of mine, and but I did watch him. Obviously got to. I met him 2 or 3 times. Funnily enough, once right out the blue when he was with Jimmy. Jimmy was my idol, Jimmy Greaves, and I think that captured the nation, didn't it? Saint and Greasy. I mean, we won't see anything like that again. But he was tough on the field. I mean, he didn't look like a centre forward. He didn't, you know, he would be like. You know, he would be that little, I think today might be that holding midfield player would stop people coming through. You know, like a little bulldozer, wasn't he? You know,
yeah,
he had that. He had I remember him scoring the header in the cup final. You know, he had that.
Yeah, Dennis was my boyhood hero. And I think there's a bit of Dennis in him. You know, I mean, I think Saint would be first to say Dennis was better. Dennis was brilliant. You know, great is an overused word in football, but Dennis was a great. Ian was a very, very, very good player, an international class player. But I think they both had a little bit of that about them. They were a bloody new. You know, Saint got me sent off once in a charity match. He dived to win a penalty. And yeah, I mean, you know, in a charity match, we were turning out we were mates by then. He had a show on the radio station I was working at in Liverpool. So we were really, really good friends. We only lived about 800 meters apart. And I know Betsy and Ian Jr. And so, you know, we were really, really close. And he died to get a penalty. And then the referee, who is a school teacher, I swore at him, sorry. And he sent me off. And Saint never came it came to my defense after the game, but he thought it was hilarious. And that competitiveness shone through even in a charity match, because not only did he won a penalty he shouldn't have had, but the opposition were down to 10. That was Ian St. John.
In a charity match, yeah.
Yeah, only his enemies were friends like that.
So much for charity.
But a great guy. And what you talk about, I must tell you, nobody has ever told Shanks stories better than Saint. He could do the voice and everything. He could even do the action. You know, when Shanks spoke to you, he took a bit of a kind of a boxing guard. He kind of stood slightly side on, and he loved his boxing, Shanks. Loved all those great American fighters of the 50s. He absolutely idolized them. When Liverpool toured, they did a preseason tour to the States, and he went to see, I can't remember, it was Joe Louis had a bar somewhere in Chicago or something, and it was almost like a pilgrimage to go and see, you know, where these guys had lived and worked and indeed fought. And he kind of stood with his hands slightly, if you can see me, Shanks would always be, he'd always be kind of ready to duck and weave if you happened to throw one at him. He spoke, and Saint could do that impression, including the body actions, perfectly. But when it came to Saint and Greavesy, the brilliance of it is that they connected with the public. And, you know, people talk a lot about, it's tabloid press. The tabloid press is the most successful media in this country because they publish what most people want to read. You know, there's some wonderful writing in The Guardian and The Independent, but there's only a few people actually want to read that. You know, sort of popular television, you know, Anton Deck and Bradley Walsh and these guys, they are people who can connect with the public because they're on the same wavelength. They're not high and above it. They're not looking down on. And that was Saint and Greavesy. They were the two guys that you would meet at the bar and want to talk football with. And that was their brilliance, that how natural and in touch with the way people thought about football. They spoke from the hearts, not from the heads. And Saint was always like that. Whenever he talked football, it was an argument. You're in an argument in 30 seconds without ever trying. He'd find a different point of view to yours, and you'd be away in an argument. And I love that. I love that kind of football conversation.